Hi, my name's Marty Westrick, and I'm the Senior Instructional Designer for Distance Learning at Columbus State University. Salisa Westrick, Associate Professor of Pharmacy Care Systems at Auburn University. Jeremy Fox, Assistant Professor of Pharmacy at Shenandoah University. And Richard Pierce, Assistant Professor and Interim Director of Division of Technology and Education at Shenandoah University, and myself will be presenting a special session on flipping the pharmacy classroom at the AACP annual meeting in Chicago. Our special session is scheduled for July 16th beginning at 3:30 p.m. Given that our topic is about flipping, we decided to flip this session. So, what we need you to do is watch this short presentation before coming to our session, and then come to this session prepared to be engaged and ready to participate. Let's quickly review the objectives for this pre-session. By the end of the pre-session lecture, you should be able to describe what the flipped classroom is, describe the pedagogical principles that support flipping, describe the best practices of the flipped classroom, and describe the potential obstacles to the successful implementation of the flipped design. Before we dive into the details, have you ever felt that your students just weren't prepared for class? Or how about running out of time for your in-class activities? Or have you ever felt that your students could not apply or transfer their knowledge to different scenarios or contexts? Or sense that your students prefer memorizing content rather than grasping its essence, or just concluded they didn't get it? If so, you're in the right place, because today we're going to explore how carefully designed flipping activities can address some of these challenges. To better understand the flip design, let's discuss it in terms of the traditional lecture. First of all, lectures aren't necessarily bad, and they can be an effective way to help students acquire new requisite knowledge. The challenge with lectures is often a matter of pacing. For some students, the information may come too slowly or cover what they already know. Other students may have trouble understanding the new information if it's presented too fast, or they may lack the prior knowledge they needed to understand the new concepts that are being presented. After a lecture, instructors often assign homework that students perform out of class, and perhaps with frustration and confusion due to a lack of support. The flipped classroom reverses the traditional lecture. Short video lectures are viewed by students oftentimes before the class session. Then, in-class time can be devoted to exercises, projects, case studies, or discussions, and if needed, the professor is there to help the students make sense of the new material. As such, the name flipped, or flipping classroom, should now make sense. Also, as you review the literature on flipping, you might see the flipped classroom referred to as the flip design, the inverted lecture, or learn now, lecture later. Let's take a look at an example of the flipped classroom that was used to teach second-year pharmacy students in a pharmacy management course at Auburn University. In each of the 5 flipped sessions, students were required to watch a couple of 7 to 15-minute audio-video recordings. Then the students had to take an online quiz in the course management system to hold them accountable for the pre-class lecture. During the majority of the class time, students worked in groups of 8 to complete a group activity. Then, during the last 15 minutes of class, the students reconvened in the large lecture hall and the instructor and students went over the assignment. During this time, the instructor had opportunities to clarify any misunderstandings related to the pre-class lecture and the in-class activity. Of course, student accountability is a key. Therefore, mid-semester and end-of-the-semester peer evaluations were built into the grading scheme. We'll talk more about this in the face-to-face portion of our special session. Let's spend a few minutes exploring some of the pedagogical principles that support flipping. First of all, learners have greater control over their learning as they can replay or review the recorded lecture as many times as needed. Also, the scaffolding of content oftentimes becomes more explicit while planning the recording of the lecture and how it will align with the classroom activities. For example, It's common for the lecturer to present the basic concepts and prerequisite knowledge, and then during the classroom activities, the students are expected to explore and apply the lecture content in greater depth or in a different context. And if you can move the lecture before class, it frees up additional time in class for active engagement activities such as case-based learning, group work, or mini projects. Additionally, these activities are oftentimes collaborative, and that can lead to an increase in student-to-student interactions. Finally, the professor is available to give real-time feedback and guidance to their students for homework that previously was performed outside of class. This potentially increases the amount of professor-to-student interactions. Careful planning is key to successfully implementing the flipped design. Let's examine some of the best practices in terms of the overall design. After that, we will explore how to record your lectures, and finally we'll take a look at how to implement activities into your classroom. First, let's look at design. It's easy to integrate the flipped design into the entire course or limit it to a few specific class sessions. To start out, you might consider selecting a few topics or content areas that can benefit by you facilitating in-class problem solving or active learning activities that students had difficulty with when working on individually or outside of class. Also, pre-class assessments should be utilized to encourage students to be prepared when they come to class. These assessments can be integrated right into the recorded lecture with prompts for questions to complete, or you could use an activity sheet that needs to be completed while the students watch the lecture. Make the assessment count, but it should be fun and should be relevant. Finally, consider using peer evaluations. These are to hold students accountable for their in-class participation. There are many collaborative activity and evaluation rubrics that can be found on the internet and customized to your course. Now let's examine recording your lecture. When you begin to record, you need to give a brief overview of the lecture, what's its purpose and relevancy, and make sure to provide some clear, measurable objectives. You might want to refer to Bloom's taxonomy to reacquaint yourself with the action verbs that are related to the different levels of learning. Short and cogent recorded lectures are recommended. The literature is pretty clear on this one. Keep your recorded lecture to 10 to 15 minutes in length. If you must go longer, then you should contextually chunk the material into 2 shorter sessions rather than 1 long recording. Finally, consider using active learning prompts, embedded questions, or activity sheets to help keep your students engaged while watching your lecture. If your students are going to participate in your classroom activities in a meaningful manner, then it's essential to keep them engaged in your recorded lecture. Best practices for the classroom emphasize the notion of active learning. If the rationale for flipping is to better engage your students, help them apply your content, and walk away with a deeper understanding, then the activities need to be designed to elicit these traits. Students should work with structured or semi-structured assignments that require active engagement. Open-ended assignments tend to promote higher-level thinking skills when compared to tightly structured assignments or problems. A few examples might be case-based learning, group role-playing, or open-ended problem solving. Students should be required to work with their peers in a collaborative manner and have some form of peer review. Having students work together is good. They can teach each other and they can learn from each other. And you might be able to modify some individual homework assignments that you already have and use them in your flipped classroom. When examining obstacles, lack of student motivation is one that needs to be addressed. Students might not be comfortable having to, as they perceive, spend additional time preparing for class. Explaining the how and why might ease their initial concerns. Also, just the thought of doing something different than the norm might send your students into panic mode. So be prepared to address that. Also, you might experience pushback from other faculty who might second-guess the notion of letting students gain some control over their learning. As some say, shifting from the sage of the stage to the guide on the side in the classroom might be a novel idea to many of your colleagues, and some faculty might perceive they would lose control of their teaching with this approach. Okay, let's take a moment to review. Up till now, we've characterized the flip design, and we've identified some of the pedagogical principles behind it, and we've discussed best practices. And we've examined a few potential obstacles that need to be addressed when implementing the flip design. So now, what we'd like for you to do is reflect upon the following before attending the special session at the AACP special session. How might you now restructure the earlier pharmacy example compared to your initial reflection? Did that change after you learned more about the flip design? What questions remain and what additional questions have surfaced in regards to the flip design? And finally, what courses or activities of yours might be good candidates for you to flip? Okay, here's the heads up on the special session. We intend for it to be very interactive. First off, we plan to share our experiences and lessons learned when using the flip class design in pharmacy. Then we're going to explore the different types of technologies and methodologies that can be used for successful flipping. And finally, we've planned some collaborative activities that can help you begin integrating the flip design into your own teaching. We hope to see you during our session at the AACP meeting in Chicago on Tuesday, July 16th at 3:30 p.m. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to contact any one of us.